Welcome to the Ed Answer Key, the podcast where in the time it takes to complete hall duty and attendance, we embark on an educational adventure for both teachers and families. So whether you're a seasoned educator or a family navigating the school system, buckle up for the Ed Answer Key.
Everyone here is just veteran teachers, but imagine being somebody new.
Oh, yeah.
So you've got to deal with that.
Right.
And on top of that, all the other like cultural differences and we talked about poverty.
Right.
Add all those variables into the mix and come up with a good lesson. And
That's
teach
so
everyone.
That's
true.
why
That's so true.
co-planning is so important because
Right.
you can't. I mean, I
You
shouldn't say you
shouldn't.
can't.
You shouldn't.
You should
Yeah,
not.
You should not.
You should not be doing that. But you
So
know,
when you say co-planning, though, what are you talking about co-planning? Because
where-
I've worked with some absolute agents of the devil, honestly. That I am telling you.
But when you ask, do you think some teachers don't understand what co-planning is?
I think they're afraid.
Okay,
Because maybe
So for
my-
those teachers that may be listening right now, what would be the optimal definition of co-planning?
How it has looked for some of us.
I can kind of explain how it would look.
Yeah. How, like when
So-
you go into a classroom as an instructional coach, what characteristics do you identify? It's like, okay, there's some co-planning going on here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about in the classroom, first off, the teachers would be seen as equal. Say if you have an inclusion teacher and the gen ed teacher, you're not going to be able to tell the difference between whom it is. When there are small groups pooled, maybe the inclusion teacher has the group that's excelling.
Right.
Maybe like there should not be any difference in any instructional strategy best serving to meet the needs of all the students that are in there.
Would that also, now with inclusion, we're talking about special education, correct? Okay, so
You could
with
also think paras with ENL, though.
that's what
And
my
ENL
question.
teachers.
So
That would be
ENL.
applied.
So how would it look as far as on the ENL side? Is it the same? You still see the same thing?
I mean, I'm going to say the T word, time.
Yeah,
like,
that's fair.
You need time to be able to,
And precious
a
time.
shared prep to actually talk through, okay, this is what the lesson's going to look like. Now, how can we tweak it? How can we co-teach? How, what kind of strategies were you going to use? What group are you going to take? What group am I? When is it going to happen? We don't have that time.
Well,
They, at least for an ENL para in my classroom, fabulous teacher, and I love her, but we don't have that shared time. So it's kind of like, okay, this is what's going to happen, and
I plan
we're
via
gonna do it
email
right.
with the we have to with paras. You have to plan via email
Really?
because
Absolutely.
they don't have a prep, and a lot of
Yeah.
times sometimes they're not even on your team, and it just is how that works. I will say one thing this year, which is so dramatic, but we have implemented for some of my like co-planning actually happening as an inclusion teacher. We both teachers have this like window, like a shade on their window, and we lock the door. There's one morning a week that we lock the door. We don't have, I think 3 mornings are taken up, but by Thursday and Friday you can actually like shut in, and we can actually discuss like the next week, not just like what we're doing, but then, okay, is there anything we want to actually change? Not creating material, not actually coming up with like what we're going to do, but like how could that look? Small group options, other time. Because if I don't lock the door, it's like you wear too many hats. People just come find you all the time.
they do.
You cannot escape it. So like, and it's a running joke, but it's like, that's actually a big problem with co-planning too, is the time, because with IEP meetings and other things, you just don't always have that each week. So that has been so we pull down the shade, turn off the light, and lock the door. That's how we've had to be in order to actually talk as a separate group, because like you can co-plan with a few people, but then when you're actually talking about individual classrooms, now I'm sharing with 2. So I have to think about, okay, your classroom versus this classroom, and it's so the time to balance that stuff with everything else that goes on. But
I think too, teachers have prep period, and usually there's a designated time that you meet during your
Totally.
prep.
Right.
But what about all those other days that I'm not talking about everybody that you're not meeting during your
Totally.
prep?
what's that
You
look
should
like?
be, yeah. What does that look like? When are you taking the time? So I remember when I used to teach in the classroom, and I was privileged to have windows. I can't
Right.
tell you how many people I would see leaving during prep to run and
Oh,
all
yeah.
that kind
No,
of stuff.
that's
That's
true.
not what prep
Totally.
is for preparing and working.
Yeah.
You do that stuff on your own time, you know,
Lunch,
because I
maybe.
feel, right.
Right.
I feel like a lot of it when we say we don't have time is we could find some time if we had
Choose the
structure,
time.
right?
Totally.
Have
Totally.
it structured, and it might be like maybe the first 35 minutes, you
Right.
know, and then I handle my business or whatever. But there's plenty of time for co-planning departmentally with your in your team or whatever to happen. But you got to make it happen.
When
and want it
people are
happen.
willing to schedule it, I will say, like working with people in your departments, if you really do want to plan with them, we like that's something we used to do, like cross teaming, and we'd actually meet one day a week at least, or like half the prep. And that you're right, like people can choose to do that. I honestly think the autonomy and the lack of I don't know how, being in a huge department, I think that's something like I'm used to. I came from a school in Georgia where it was like every single person, we had a shared lesson plan document, and every single classroom was the same. Like everybody had the same lesson. So like each teacher would take a week and we'd each plan the weeks long, and then we'd use everybody else's plans for the other. No, you'd tailor it for your own classroom, but it was common planning. That's how we did it. So then we'd meet in the morning and be like, okay, how's this going to look for you? It's the same lesson, but let's talk about it. You know, and that was, and I was gen ed teacher at the time, but it was like, everybody did it. So it was just so consistent. But like here, it's like, what are you doing? What are you up to? You know, nobody really talks about it. It's just, and I'm in that kind of elitist department. So it's like one of those that that's kind of how it works.
See, and that is how our department works. My department is
Right.
much more, you know, the same thing in all our classrooms, and we just kind of share those ideas. And now, thankfully, we're in a smaller department. I teach science, so it's not a huge department, and thankfully we just have fantastic teachers and we're all friends outside of school.
Right.
You know, I think that probably has something to do with it. But yeah, it's very nice to know this teacher's got my back and there's going to be lessons there.
And it's,
and
trust.
I'm
Trust.
going to tailor it to my class, but I know that they're going to be there. So
I think also we can't assume that, say, if you say, okay, this is how I'm going to do this, that teachers understand
Totally.
what you mean, because you have different
Novice.
You have novice, you have very experienced, you have some that are just like, oh, I'm really uneasy about doing these small groups or whatever it may be. So actually taking the teachers through, and you're being the student and not just talking.
Totally.
Actions speak louder than words. So taking you through it, experiencing it as a teacher / student makes a big difference too.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the Ed Answer Key. Your support means the world to us. Be sure to stay in the loop about upcoming topics by downloading our free podcast companion at www.edanswerkey.com. So until next time, class dismissed.